Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we get the right guests, ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. We have a big interview for you tonight. We are speaking to Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance on a whole range of issues. A few days ago, the staff team from the IMF left town with positive news for the board. They say they would give a positive review of Ghana's economy, hoping that Ghana would attract the next tranche of $600 million. We'll try and understand all of that from the Minister of State's perspective and also look ahead to the 2024 budget, which will be read in a few weeks. Stay with us.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380.
Welcome back. So tonight we're talking to Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam. He is the Member of Parliament for Karaga. He's the Minister of State for Finance, a very important position in the country. So the Finance Ministry's Minister of State can do many things that deputy ministers can do. And 5 months ago, he was moved from Deputy Minister for Energy to this position. Doc, welcome to the show. Good evening.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Doing great.
So you were moved from energy to finance. How has it been so far for you?
Well, I mean, it's been quite challenging, but it's also satisfying, you know, because you are assuming greater responsibility and working with the Minister for Finance and then taking directions from him has strengthened my resolve. You know, I've also gotten new perspectives into how government finances are managed. And therefore, yes, my contribution, I believe, has been very positive. So
your trajectory has been, at least in the past few years, the energy sector. We know you for what you did at ASEP and then Deputy Minister for Energy, which is a huge position for 6 years. So when you were announced as the nominee for Finance Minister of State, what kind of emotion was it? Was it happiness? Was it concern? Was it, what was it?
Well, I mean, the link between energy and economics is so strong, you know, because energy is also about finance. And therefore, with my background in finance and energy and economics, I mean, don't forget that I've studied economics all my tertiary education life, and that is why I ended up in energy and petroleum economics as well. And that's just the application of economic principles to the energy sector. So I don't see, you know, much differences. And secondly, this ministry handles the energy sector finances as well, and it's a huge, you know, sector, as you know, one of the very important sectors of our economy. Without energy, you will not have economic growth. Government has to absorb debts which are supposed to be paid by the energy sector, which is not generating enough. And so all these are huge issues which could dislocate the entire economy. It could dislocate the entire government finances. And therefore, to be able to bring that perspective and that experience to support the minister, for me, has been very satisfying. And I believe that the minister at the right time will say or not whether my support to him has been fruitful.
Which means that your appointment was possibly at the minister's own request because of your background. The admission that the energy portfolio is very financial and that our finances publicly now, the energy challenge is one of the main bottlenecks. So it's almost like you are emblematic of that transition from possibly a market-facing finance ministry emphasis to more resolving some of the structural issues with the energy sector.
You are never able to tell what informs the president's choice, you know, but once the opportunity has come to you, you should be ready. You should put yourself in readiness to face the challenges, and that is what I have done so far.
Where is government's where is the economy? The IMF team came to town and they are saying they will give a positive review to the board. That's fine. But when you look at the numbers in relation to the big figures, where would you say we are in terms of our own recovery?
Well, as far as recovery is concerned, I think that the figures show clearly that we are recovering, and we are recovering so fast. If you recall, we front-loaded the IMF fiscal adjustment into the 2023 budget, which was presented in November 2022. So from that point, even though we had not formally gotten approval of the IMF program, which happened in May this year, government had decided through a program we put in place, the PCPEC, the program of post-COVID program for economic growth. That outlined a number of policy measures that government wanted to implement. And this is why when the IMF is speaking, they always say IMF supported program. They are supporting that program we developed for ourselves. And some of the policies we are implementing under the IMF program were our own policies. And government had front-loaded those policies and measures in the 2023 budget. And this is why in the first quarter, growth, for example, grew by 3.3%. In the second quarter, it grew by 3.2%. And so half into the year, growth rebound has been strong, averaging 3.2% against 3% same time last year. And so that clearly tells you that there is a path to recovery. The IMF actually projected that we will grow at 1.5% this year. And if half into the year, we are already growing 3.2%. And some of the policies are yet to mature. Some of government programs are yet to mature. I mean, it's indicative of the fact that by the end of the year, we should be doing far more than what the IMF projected. And that is a great sign of recovery. But this is not the only indicator. Inflation, which is a very important indicator for attracting investment, for improving domestic investment, has also been decelerating from 54% December 2022. To date, it is about 40%, and it's going to continue because 40% is still high. And so we will expect that the disinflationary path we have been following will continue until we reach a single-digit inflation by 2028, as per the IMF program. But apart from inflation, the exchange rate has also been stable. It was for year to date, I think from January to date, year to date is about 22%. Compared with 37% same time last year. But if you take out January, the exchange rate depreciation has been just about 3.1%. And so as far as the exchange rate is concerned, it's been stable, and that has enabled businesses to plan. That has also strengthened our export potential because the current account also shows that we are exporting more than we are importing. We have a current account surplus, and therefore, if you look at all these indicators...
So give me three.
Yes.
Growth, inflation, exchange rate. Let's take them one by one briefly.
Yes.
You are using the IMF figure to say we've done well. But if you look at the World Bank, they recently published the Africa Pulse report, where Ghana's economic growth was expected to decelerate to 1.5 compared to their projection. Now, they say it was a slowdown in growth, which was a sharp drop from the 3.1% growth last year. They also then said that reasons for the lower growth than they projected was persistent high inflation, lower credit as a result of elevated interest rates, and weaknesses in the energy sector. So whilst the performance is better than what IMF is projecting, the World Bank's view is almost like our growth is worse than they were anticipating. So they are lowered their projection. What's your comment on that?
Actually, last year we recorded 3.1%. Their projection is not far away from last year, except that they expect us to grow at 3% this year. So that's where the difference is. But the IMF projected 1.5% on the back of the fiscal consolidation. I mean, it's basic economics. When you embark on fiscal consolidation, growth will suffer initially, and then it will take off later. And so it wasn't wrong for the IMF to project a lower growth. But as I indicated earlier, we had front-loaded the fiscal consolidation earlier into the 2023 budget. And so the effects are already being felt. You also will note that the World Bank did not take into consideration the additional 30,000 barrels of crude oil, which was brought on stream. And therefore, that is also going to somehow diverge our growth projection from what the World Bank projected.
Fair enough. Let's deal with inflation. Again, 54 down to 40 seems to be progress. But I need to point out to you that food inflation is 51.9%. That's 52%. And for 68% of Ghanaians, food accounts for half of their expenditure. So about 70% of Ghanaians, food inflation is about 50%. So yes, you can say inflation has come down. 40% is still very high. But the fact that food inflation is that elevated is a very worrying signal. So again, how does government resolve that? It's one thing to say we are recovering, but if you look at the details of the inflation, there's a lot to be worried about, isn't there?
Well, if you decompose the food inflation, you will also notice from the data that imported food inflation was about 63%. And then domestic food inflation was about 51%. Yes. So it meant that the food inflation was largely influenced by the imported food. And you know that,
51 is still high.
Yes, 51 is still high. But if you compare that to 63, then of course you will know where the difference is. And so where food prices globally increased significantly following the Russia-Ukraine challenges, and even the fight over grain supplies from Ukraine, India decided to ban export of rice, to other countries. All those contributed to food inflation increasing globally. And the fact that we also import significant amount of the food we consume here, you were expecting to have imported inflation. Okay, so they all played a role. But you will also recognize that government has launched the Planting for Food and Jobs Phase 2. And also with the good harvest that we are expecting this year, we expect the domestic food inflation to significantly go down. And this is why I said that the disinflation path that we have been following is going to be consistently going down. And we are very confident that inflation will go down further.
But if inflation is cost-driven, why is the central bank persistently increasing their monetary policy rate as if inflation was a monetary issue? Because the answer and explanation you just gave me suggests that a lot of the inflation is supply side. So why, of course, you don't work for the central bank, but you're supposed to work in concert. Does that not admit that this persistent high interest rate we are having, occasioned by the constant upward revision of their reference rate, is misguided?
Well, I think that the last MPC meeting maintained the policy rate. It is in recognition of the disinflation path. And so when the inflation increases, then of course they will use monetary tightening to control it. And this is not peculiar to Ghana. I mean, globally, even the advanced countries, they use monetary tightening to control inflation. But it is also important to recognize that interest rates are significant to the extent that when they are higher, then it means that government is spending more, crowding out the private sector, and that contributes to inflation. Okay, and so it's a monetary issue as well. And this is why the Bank of Ghana will use their monetary policy, not just on inflation, but also through the interest rate. Okay, and so when they increase the monetary rate or the monetary policy rate, it certainly will have effect on domestic interest rate and thereby inflation as well.
But
and so
I agree with that.
Yes.
My worry is that as we speak, the government continues to borrow. Your Treasury bill auctions have been oversubscribed. So whilst you've been cut out of the external market, you are borrowing domestically at very, very high rates. So the suggestion is that this temporary reprieve in inflation could come back if your trend of borrowing, particularly on the Treasury bill market, continues.
No, there is a link, a very strong link between the Treasury bill rate and then also the monetary policy rate. And so when you see the monetary policy increasing, you will also see the Treasury bill rate increasing. Okay, and so if the Bank of Ghana, through monetary tightening, is able to reduce inflation, it certainly will reduce domestic interest rate and thereby also reduce the Treasury bill rate. So there is that consistency. And so the disinflation path that we are following will certainly have effect eventually on inflation and thereby on the policy rate and the rate for the Treasury.
I'm talking about you see, you are borrowing money using Treasury bills that you are selling. So what that does in simple terms is that if I have money to invest in a farm, I'll rather come and buy government Treasury bills. that does two things. It crowds out Mr. Senyo Hosi, who wants to borrow to expand his farm in Adakulu. That's point number one. Point number two, when we oversubscribe the Treasury bill, it drives the rate up. Do you understand my point? So my point is that the government's borrowing from the T-bill market will undermine its own disinflationary intentions.
I don't think so. Provided there's liquidity in the domestic financial space, you know, for access to credit to increase, I don't see that affecting that. And that is what we are trying to do. We're trying to improve liquidity. Already liquidity is not a problem as today. Solvency is the problem. But in spite of that, we are injecting more resources into the local financial system through the Financial Stability Fund. That will make money more available to the private sector, and so that they don't need to compete with government for borrowing. Apart from that, government itself has started controlling its borrowing. And in addition to control our borrowing, government is aggressively pursuing revenue generation. And this is why we have recently approved a medium-term revenue strategy that will seek to increase the amount of money we generate. But even with that, expenditure is also being controlled. I mean, if you look at the data, then you will see that by half this year, we spent 68 billion cedis, which was 26% below program spending of 93 billion cedis. And so we are doing everything to ensure that money is released to the private sector and the interest rates.
I want to take you on, on the liquidity issue, because the domestic debt exchange left our banks in a difficult financial situation. Admittedly, a lot of it was solvency related, because the debt exchange went to income, which affects their capital. But I argue that once you start having solvency problems, you just have a liquidity problem a few months ahead, if not dealt with. So I'm still pushing that the financial sector is not in a good place. And government's forays into the T-bill market will not necessarily help our financial institutions unless the resolving of the challenges of the banks particularly is done quickly. We are going to have a very major crisis on the financial sector.
Yeah, you know, we agree that the DDEP affected the local financial sector. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But the effect is not the same between liquidity and solvency. Okay? Even on the liquidity side, the Bank of Ghana itself had taken measures through, for example, reducing the capital adequacy ratio, which ensured that many of the local banks still stayed within their capital adequacy ratio. The other side, which is the solvency side, is where there is a problem, particularly for state-owned banks. And this is what we are committed to addressing. And this is why we set up the Financial Stability Fund that will inject more money into these banks, Ghana Commercial Bank, CBG, ADB, so that they become stronger, so that they are able to meet the capital adequacy ratio and also be able to make more resources available to the private sector. This what we think will unleash growth, you know, and thereby enable our economy to grow beyond what is projected by the World Bank and what is projected by the IMF.
So should I take it that the Ghana Financial Stability Fund will focus entirely or predominantly on solvency?
Yes.
And not liquidity?
Yes, there's a liquidity window which the Bank of Ghana is addressing.
Which means you admit that there will be a liquidity problem?
The liquidity window is so small. And so the bulk of the Ghana Stability Fund will go towards the solvency challenges.
But there will be a liquidity window?
Very, very insignificant.
This is the point of view. You're talking to Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam. Let's wrap up on the state of the economy on the exchange rate. The rate of depreciation of the cedi, as you said, has declined. But that's only when you compare it to last year. And we need to say that last year was an extraordinary year. So if you say you are recovering, should we not really look at pre-2022 numbers? Well, then I mean, that's when, for example, if you look at the rate, I can get $1 for about 11 cedis today. Look, I could get $1 for around 8 cedis prior to the 2022 crisis.
Yes.
All right. So if you say you are recovering, then you need to let us look at pre-2022 August.
You want us to go back to
because
to
2022 August, everything went wrong.
Yes.
And we know why. Portfolio investors were removing their money. At the same time, there were challenges with different things. So the currency dropped to almost 16. So if you say you are recovering on the exchange rate side, a more realistic comparator would be pre-July 2022. Then you can say whether you are really strong or not.
Well, it depends on the kind of analysis you want to do. I mean, most of the conventional analysis we do is comparing current year versus the year before. And that is well accepted. I mean, globally, that's how that.
For our context, is it adequate?
If you want us to go back to 2022, we can do that analysis. But the context is not the same. Because the economic fundamentals in 2022 were not the same as today. And so you cannot expect outliers in today's economy. They also have to be consistent with other indicators of the economy. And as I said earlier, we are recovering. To have 3.1% depreciation is pretty good, to the extent that from February to this year, Ghana's currency has been rated the best performing currency in Africa. That is a mark of a change, a significant change in the affairs of our monetary and exchange rate management. Now, if you look at last year...
You are using February till now.
Yes, if you look at last year...
But the question says, you see, we can pick and choose which aspect of the data to say which story.
Yeah.
But overall, the currency, if you look at a year to now, the currency has depreciated maybe 13%. That's still a lot.
In fact, I'm using February to now to let you appreciate where we're coming from. In November, we actually reached 54% depreciation.
That's my point.
Okay. By January, it came down to some 23%. Okay. And then from February to date, just about 3 points. So it tells you the recovery, the story behind the recovery. Okay. So it's not just out of the blue.
But is this sustainable?
You have come from a peak of 54 in November, okay, to 23 in January, and then to 3.1 from February to this time. It is a big story about recovery.
But you see, that
you can't lose sight of that.
What we need to check is that what has been the basis of the recovery. So, for example, in the past, we'll go for Eurobond to prop up the currency artificially. As you speak, the first tranche of 600 million has come from the World Bank, IMF. Second tranche is possible to come. So you can have a stability which is false, because when somebody makes an injection like 600 million, and you use it into your central bank governance reserves, that strengthens the currency. But structurally, the currency is still very, very weak.
I mean, it's not the only reason. I mean, I have to tell you that last year, you saw how prices increased. And then we saw how people relied on that to speculate. And so speculation was one of the major reasons why the exchange rate depreciated so much. But the Bank of Ghana moved in quickly to address the speculation. And so you expected a downward trend in the area of depreciation. Then before the IMF money came in May, we had already seen the cedi appreciating. And that's why I gave you the January figure depreciation, and then also from February. The IMF money came in May. And so that could not be the reason for the depreciation, for the performance in the cedi. Don't also forget that our current account balance has been surplus. And by surplus means that we are exporting more than we are importing. And so we are bringing in more forex through the export. That also strengthens our currency. Okay? And so there are so many other reasons that you can attribute the performance of the cedi to, and not just the injection of $600 million in May.
Okay, this is the point of view. We're talking to Minister of State, Minister of Finance, Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam. When we come back, we'll look at the future briefly. The staff team of the IMF have finished their review for September, and they say they will recommend to the board a positive story. But that is contingent on some very important things. The creditor committee has to agree in principle for debt treatment. We have not even spoken about Eurobond yet. How optimistic is government that we will get that done? We're also preparing for the 2024 budget, and this will be an election year budget. How is government going to manage expectations for more roads, more buildings, with the fiscal adjustment that they have front-loaded? All of that and more when we come back. Stay with us.
How do I I cope with this heat?
By staying 5 degrees cooler.
Body odor is caused by germs, and on hot days, the sweating and the odor are more. That's why you need to get the new improved Dettol Cool soap, which offers up to 5 degrees instant cooling sensation.
This advert is FDA approved.
Emirates Premium Economy. One day, all airlines will have seats like this. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight we're talking to Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam, MP for Karaga and Minister of State at the Finance Ministry. Very critical time for Ghana's finances. Staff team of IMF just left town with positive news for the board, but the board for the IMF are the real short holders. And they have said, indeed, even the staff team lead said, we want specific commitments from your bilateral creditors, which will convince the board to approve the next tranche. The question is, how optimistic is government? I'm asking because initially in June, we had said we're hoping for some agreement with creditors by September, but now it's moved to November. What's going on, and what is the outlook for the external creditors and what they will say about our debts?
I mean, if you recall the time the IMF board approved our program, people were very pessimistic, again, because one of the important conditions we had to meet was financing assurances from the same official creditors. And people were not sure that we're going to get a financing assurance, particularly given the fact that it took Zambia, several months, I think about 16 months or so, for them to get a financing assurance. And then also Chad, which wanted financial assurance, they never got it. And then also Ethiopia never got it. And then Sri Lanka, it took them about 7 months to get it. It took us just 5 months to get our financing assurances from the time we signed the SLA, the staff level agreement. And so Ghana is in a different class because the global view of Ghana is very positive. Okay, and therefore we also have very strong relationship with most of our diplomatic partners, most of who constitute the official creditor committee. China is co-chairing, France is co-chairing, and you have other bilateral friendly countries that are members of the Paris Club. And so it wasn't very prolonged a time for us to be able to convince them to give us the financing assurance, and that paved way for the IMF board to approve. Again, this time around, people are pessimistic that we will not get an MOU with the Paris Club, and I want to assure you that we are going to get the MOU.
By November?
Yeah, we are very optimistic about that. Don't forget that by May, as of May, we had presented our offer, which outlined the debt restructuring scenarios. And so we did our part of the job. And also, because they are also looking at how Ghana is performing under the IMF program, and given the positive judgment the IMF has given to Ghana, it should strengthen our resolve in our optimism that we will get the MOU with the Paris Club. To pave way for the board to approve. But
it would have been good to know what terms you were proposing, because already on the domestic side, people have been adversely affected by the debt exchange. The bilaterals is the second level. There's also the Eurobond, which we know a lot of it will be based on what the bilaterals agree on. So this is leg 2. Right? So if you say you're optimistic, is it just for the fact that an MOU will be signed, or that the terms you've proposed will be agreed? Which terms will be favorable to our economy in the long run?
I'm unable to talk about the terms because we are negotiating, and it's not good to disclose issues relating to terms when you are negotiating. So that would be premature for us to do. But the MOU will set the stage for negotiation of the terms, and that is what is needed. It is not concluding the restructuring that is required before the IMF will approve and then also disburse. If the requirement was to complete the debt restructuring, that would have been problematic, because that may take some little more time. But what they want is just an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, committing to start negotiation on the terms of the restructuring, and that I think that we will get it.
What about the IPPs? Because the independent power producers in June had threatened that they would cut the supply if some of their debts had not been paid, and they've also been quite clear that they are not going to take any haircuts. So they expect full payment. So I'm not sure if your optimism around the bilaterals and the Eurobond eventually also applies to the independent power producers, who are a separate category.
I mean, let me say, first of all, that the IPPs are doing a great job in Ghana. And the fact that they have ensured that we do not have interruption in power supply is a big credit to them, particularly as we owe them so much, close to $1 billion US dollars. They have not cut supplies. The reason is that there are two types of payments we have to make to them. First of all, being current in our payment for power we consume. And the second one is the arrears that have built up over the years. And it's not just recent. The arrears have built up over the past 10 or more years. And so it's not going to take one day to clear all these arrears. And that is why we are negotiating with them to restructure the arrears. But whilst we are restructuring, discussing the restructuring, we have decided to be current in our payments through the cash waterfall mechanism. The cash waterfall mechanism was not performing well in the past because it did not guarantee payments to the IPPs, who now constitute almost 60% of our power supply. And so if you want to guarantee power supply, you need to be sure that the people who provide 60% of your power are secure as far as their payment is concerned. And that is what we have taken into discussions with them. We've had conversations with them, very fruitful conversations, and we have reviewed and revised the cash waterfall mechanism in order to guarantee payment for the power we consume. Let me also say that the contracts we have with these IPPs are mostly take-or-pay contracts. And take-or-pay contracts means that whether you consume or not, you have to pay. We didn't sign those contracts, but the liability is on us. What we have done intelligently is to negotiate with them to defer the excess capacity to 5 years, beyond 5 years, in order to allow us to pay for only what we are consuming today. Okay, and so we have had that understanding with them, and we are doing that religiously. Every month we pay 43 million US dollars that is shared among the IPPs relative to the power we consume from each of them. Okay, and so we are very current as far as payment is concerned, and the payment is secure. We are not going to fail. And so I can tell Ghanaians that no IPP is going to cut supply of power to us. We've guaranteed that part.
You say the cash waterfall is working. It will be interesting to know when, because as of July this year, when the organization you used to head did their review on the IMF conditionalities in the power sector, they said a couple of things. They said, while the focus of the IMF has been on raising tariffs, which have risen by 100% between September 2022 and June 2023, the increase in tariffs, which has led to increase in revenue for the power parastatal, has not translated into liquidity. And according to them, the cash waterfall mechanism implemented to improve liquidity failed to achieve its objective in two key areas: ensuring proportional distribution of revenues and enhancing revenue collection. They went ahead to say that the 3.1 billion that the ECG collected within the period, only 1.1 billion was accounted for. They don't know what the rest went to. They claim, for example, some of the money was used to procure liquid fuel for some power plants. So I'm not sure when you say the cash waterfall is working, are you talking about just this final quarter? Because as of July, when this report was written, there were still issues with liquidity and the cash waterfall mechanism.
Well, I mean, I have to be frank with you that the liquidity in the energy sector will continue to be a problem unless ECG is able to step up. Already we have seen significant improvement in ECG's revenue collection. They used to do 400 million Ghana cedis a month. Okay, now it has increased to $1 billion cedis a month. That's about 100% improvement. But they need to do more, because until they are able to collect all their money, we have up to 24, 30% losses, and they need to be able to collect all this. If they are able to collect that, then we should have sufficient money in the cash waterfall mechanism to pay all the players in the value chain. Okay. So as I speak to you, we do not have shortfall associated with IPPs.
Okay.
As I explained, we pay them. Where we have shortfall is our local SOEs, because the balance after you have paid the IPPs is not enough to fully fund their invoices. And that is where the Ministry of Finance comes in to take over the shortfall. And so we have been paying the shortfall and will continue to pay the shortfall while putting pressure on ECG to increase their collection to the level that we will no longer pay the shortfall. Because really, we should not be using our revenue to be paying the shortfall, because energy or electricity is a commercial commodity itself. Okay, but there are structural challenges faced with ECG is faced with, and the entire energy sector is faced with. And this is why, under the fund program, we have a strong commitment to reform the energy sector. And I can tell you that after revising the cash waterfall mechanism, we have also now created a single collection account, where ECG had several accounts and all the accounts were receiving money. Today we have a single collection account, and all the money they collect goes to that account. And we've also instituted quarterly audit of the collection in order to ensure that the money we expect actually comes in. Okay. So it can be used to pay the players in the value chain.
A final concern with the sector, that while you are negotiating to restructure the debt owed IPPs, couple of things. The under recovery in the power sector, again according to assets, about 97 billion. Now, the capex for 6 key infrastructure ministries is about 48 billion. So if the
what's under recovery? How do they explain under recovery? Because I don't know what it
basically
means.
They are talking about different
they're talking
losses.
About the shortfall.
They add all together, and they have a ballpark figure of 97 billion.
Well, I've not seen this paper, so I'm not able to tell how they did it.
Fair enough.
But I can tell you that.
No, but I haven't even framed the question.
Yes.
No, they are saying that beyond that.
I'm first of all contesting the data before you frame the question.
Okay, fair
and if
enough.
that's the basis for your question, you may change your question.
It's part of the basis, because the other point is that, for example, ECG has renewed the AXA power plants, which are old plants which they say was overpaid for by Ghanaians, and the ECG signed an additional 15-year extension for the AXA plant. They think this is not prudent for the energy sector going forward. So it's basically going to encumber the energy sector to an unproductive power plant that will create more problems for us. So my point is that whilst you are trying to solve the solvency and liquidity issues in the sector, they believe there are decisions being taken within that power sector which will worsen the problem in the coming years. And I'm asking whether from the finance ministry perspective, you are concerned and following all the developments within the sector as far as these agreements are concerned?
Well, I mean, ECG is a corporate, body. It has a board, and they take their decisions supported by their board. The finance ministry is concerned about the financial implications of the decisions they make. And so to the extent that there are financial challenges associated with those decisions, the Minister of Finance really will evaluate those decisions before they go ahead to implement those decisions. As I speak to you, we don't have any record that ECG has extended the contract of AXA.
The AXA?
Yeah, we don't have that record here.
From the finance ministry perspective?
And AXA is not implementing that, extended contract. Otherwise, we would have known. And we would have evaluated the financial implications to prepare for it. But as I speak to you, it is not on our record. Let me also indicate to you that the government has set up a government negotiation team, which I chair, to negotiate the restructuring, not just of the arrears, but also of the power purchase agreement. And the AXA contract is part of what we are negotiating. So I'm surprised when I'm told that a contract has already been extended.
ECG has not signed an additional 50-year extension for the AXA power plants.
We don't have that in our record. We are reading it.
They even say that both the technical and commercial regulators of the sector, Energy Commission and PRC, approve this renewal.
We don't have that on our record.
Wow. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the budget and also Coco sector. This is still the point of view. Talking to Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam. Stay with us.
become a house owner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You Go Flip, a real estate gaming platform that allows you to play and stand a chance of winning a house or cash or consolidated prizes, such as savings towards a house. Simple and easy to play. Visit www.yougoflip.com. Buy a ticket to enter the game. Wait for the end of the game to enjoy the win. Anyone can win. Flip it or own it. You Go Flip. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Play responsibly, not for persons below 18 years, and gaming can be addictive.
Just close the doors, and you're in a world of your own. Travel is not just about the destination, it's also about how you get there. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Welcome back to The Point of View. We're still talking to Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam, on a wide variety of issues. Last week, the IMF staff team left town. They say the recovery is on. They are recommending to the board for, based on what we do, the next 600 million. We're also looking at the energy sector. Let's talk about cocoa. We've raised the producer price of cocoa by a substantial amount, but the sector is struggling. We know that the syndicated loan amount they will get is much lower than previously anticipated. So it's almost like you've raised the amount of money you are paying cocoa farmers without getting the finance for it. Cocoa board is not in a very good shape. Now, the Herald newspaper this week did a story that says, Ken Oforiatta wants collapsing cocoa board rescued. And basically, in his response to a question during the press conference about cocoa board, the minister said both he and the governor would be on the board of cocoa board. And the Herald's interpretation of that is he basically admits that the cocoa board is on his knees and therefore he wants to be closer to the situation to see what's going on. So first and foremost, you know cocoa and energy are two of the biggest sectors that affect our financials. What is the ministry's assessment of the state of cocoa board? And is the finance ministry's personal interest on being on the board born out of his concern for the declining fortunes of the company?
Let me say that, first of all, the Minister for Finance is on the board of Cocoa Board already. And you know, sometimes ministers are so busy that they sometimes designate one of their deputies to serve on the board on their behalf. And so before I came into this ministry, the minister had designated my predecessor to be on the board. So when my predecessor was no more here, the minister had decided to take the seat himself, even before I came in here. And so since I came in 5 months ago, I have not been assigned responsibility to sit on the board on his behalf. And I've never attended any of their board meetings. So that story, to say the least...
So it's not as if you were being removed for...
No, to say the least, it's unfounded. I'm sure if the journalist had spoken to the ministry and sought clarification, he wouldn't have gone ahead to...
But to the extent that the minister's answer about his being on the board and the governor being on the board was to a question Bloomberg asked about the state of cocoa board, could that suggest that the minister wants to be closer to the situation himself? Because he could have opted for a minister of state to be there, but he wants to be on the board himself.
He could have even opted for a director to be there. But if he decided to be, why do you question that?
No, we are not questioning that. We are asking whether that... No, we are not questioning his being on the board. We are questioning the state of cocoa board, its importance to our finances, and the minister's admission that this company is not in a good shape.
If the minister is given new impetus, new push to bring in cocoa board around, it is also in recognition of the fact that under the fund program, we have developed a turnaround strategy for cocoa board. Okay, and the minister himself wants to supervise the implementation of this turnaround strategy. Don't also forget that cocoa board is under the Ministry of Agriculture. It is not under the Ministry of Finance. However, we want to strengthen our cooperation, our collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture to be able to supervise particularly the financial aspects of the management of Coco board. It is not only the minister sitting on the board alone. He's also setting up a Coco Dex in the Ministry of Finance, and to get technical people who will advise him, as well as the Minister for Agric, to be able to revive Coco board and bring Coco board back to their heydays. That's exactly what the minister is doing.
The MPP sold to Ghanaians a story that Coco had been mismanaged by the NDC. And when the Agric minister was campaigning, he said they will bring Coco and the Agric to revamp production. Here we are in 2023, and we are admitting that Coco board is on its knees. As we speak, there's a report that chocolate prices globally could get higher if Africa's cocoa crop flops. And they were looking at Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire output for this year. Already we are told the output will not be great because the rains have been disappointing. So my question is, you went all around to tell us you're going to save cocoa sector. You put it under Agric. Now finance ministry is going back there, and the production in terms of tonnage is coming down. The company itself is almost insolvent. Honestly, you should be apologizing to Ghanaians.
No, I think that you should rather praise us for being bold.
Really?
Of course, because the government that runs away from the problem is a government that should be apologizing.
But you've had 6 years to solve the cocoa problem. And it's probably in a worse state than it was before you took over.
No. We have 8 years. We have 4 years and 4 years. We did our 4 years. Cocoa board wasn't in that state. If Cocoa board has faced challenges and the government is so bold to the extent that the government has developed a turnaround strategy, and that is what government is there to do.
In this 11th hour,
government is there to do that.
2023, but don't forget that
government is continuing. Government is continuing. Don't forget that.
Yeah, but you have had 7 years to prove to us whether you can solve the cocoa sector problems. Yes. Here we are now. You are saying Cocoa board is almost insolvent, and you are going to have a turnaround strategy in 2023.
Yes,
because a year to an election.
No, because we still have a mandate. And as we have the mandate and there are challenges, we are not going to run away from the challenges. Otherwise, why should we go to the IMF 2 years into government? Because we respect the mandate of the people of Ghana. And therefore, when we have faced challenges, we have been bold to design measures that will address the challenges.
But you need to admit that you failed. You have to admit that you failed the cocoa sector.
You see, within 1 year, you know, the economy is recovering. It takes, for even the advanced countries, it takes them sometimes 5 years for their economies to recover.
But that recovery, you know, that recovery is on paper, and it's also
it's not on paper. It's not on paper.
Because if you ask the ordinary Ghanaian, the state of his economy,
we are back to this.
No, we are not.
We are back to this.
Tell me that inflation has come down from 54, which was the worst last year, to 40. 40 is still over 30% higher than your own target of plus or minus 8. That's not a recovery. So the fact that last year we had such a difficult inflation, and this year is 40% inflation is the highest in West Africa. So it's a very serious inflation figure.
What has been our target?
Inflation
for last year, this year, it wasn't 8%.
No, I'm talking about the
last year it wasn't 8%. This year is not 8%.
No, the central bank's inflation target.
Our target to achieve 8% is 2028, and we are working towards that. And you can see that this inflation
after last year's challenges.
Don't forget that we have reached that before COVID set in. Inflation had reached a single-digit, inflation, which government was in power. We did it. Okay. And so when we have faced global challenges that has dislocated our economy, it's not just ours. Even the advanced countries have been affected. And some of them have not even started recovering.
But
and we have been able to put ourselves in order.
We've been affected, and then we've been affected worse. For example, the IMF released a report last week about Ghana being its largest debtor among a category of countries in Africa. Second was Kenya, third was DRC. So if you look at that data, this was just 2 weeks ago they released the figure.
I think that you need to read that story again. It was misreported.
So what's the truth?
We are not. They actually brought data that shows that we are not. We are not the highly indebted country.
They said in relation to a specific category of funding.
And what is that category? That's what we should look at. What is that category? And within that category, what is the composition of that category within our debt profile generally? Well, it's so small.
Well, but they looked at your
it's so small.
But my point is that the effect of the external crisis on our economy seems to have been worse than for other countries.
You see, And I've heard people say that, talking about Togo and Ivory Coast and others. Yeah. But you see, we must analyze economics based on context. We are an open economy. Those countries are not open economies. Their economies are tied to the economy of France or Paris. They don't even have monetary policy. They rely on the monetary policy of the Central Bank of France. And so they are not as exposed to global shocks as we are. And so when you are a small open economy, and then there is capital flight, because the interest rates of advanced countries increased, because they were also using monetary tightening to control inflation. And people will find investing in those countries more profitable than investing in our countries. And they started moving their investment away. What do you expect? You will suffer the consequences. That is not the same with Ivory Coast, because the largest investor in Ivory Coast is France itself. In Togo, it's France itself. And they did not take out their investment. So the context is important. If we don't do this analysis, then we will just dismiss Ghana as a non-performing country that is going about crying that we are
what you've said, what you've said may be true, but if you look at, for example,
that may be true. It isn't true.
I'm saying that if you look at, for example, exposure of countries on the continent to Russia, Ukraine. So, for example, take grains, Egypt, take Kenya, take East Africa. They are more dependent on Ukraine, Russia for direct importation of wheat than we are. Yet they didn't take as much a hit. So I do understand what you're saying about the portfolio investors, which also means that a lot of the investors' interest in Ghana is actually not long-term. When they see an option somewhere else, so it means that it wasn't even a sustainable strategy.
Yeah, but you know that Eurobond investors are not long-term. You know that.
So it means we have a structural problem we have to deal with, COVID and Ukraine, Russia or not, which we all have to admit.
Of course.
And that we are more exposed than other countries, which should inform the kind of choices we make.
It is our liberal policy as a country. And that is a policy we have held for a long time. Liberalization of the economy has been the policy we have held for a long time.
And what are you doing to change that?
That is why this government has just approved a new growth strategy that will seek, I don't want to use the word domesticate, that will seek to promote export promotion. In other words, we want to be able to inject more resources through the budget, the next budget, 2024 budget, into agriculture. That is why the second phase of Planting for Food and Jobs has been launched. We're going to focus on tourism, okay? We're going to put more money into digitalization. So these are the areas that we want to be able to push further so that they can generate growth domestically in order for us to aggressively pursue export promotion so that we can be able to rely on ourselves and reduce the level of imports. Already, our current account balance is showing a surplus. It means that we are exporting more than we are importing. Right. And we want to be able to pursue this agenda.
Let me just qualify the question I asked. Ghana is the highest borrower under the Poverty Loan Facility, and this is from the IMF. So, according to the IMF, the Poverty Trust, which is one of the funds countries can draw credit from, specifically to support the potential balance of payment problems of low-income countries over a period. Their quarterly report for July ending puts Ghana as the highest indebted country under the trust, broadly known as Concessional Loan and Debt Relief Trust. This is because Ghana accounts for almost 10% of the 17.6 million or billion special drawing rights of total loans, followed only by DRC and Kenya. So that was the point.
That's how much in all for Ghana.
So
10%.
10%. So that's about 1.7 billion SDR.
Yes, 1.7 billion SDR.
Yes.
And that translates into, I'm not sure what the conversion is.
Probably about 3 billion.
Yeah, and if you look at our debt profile, what will that constitute? Less than 10% of our debt profile. Less than 10% of our debt profile.
No problem. Let's end with the budget.
Yes.
In a few weeks, we are reading the budget. This is an election year budget. Roads projects, some have stalled. I spoke to people in the Ministry of Roads complaining about a lot of the road projects not moving quickly enough. The spokesperson for the ministry said to me, the IMF program has affected our road projects. We have an election in December 2024. We are in the middle of an austerity program. Citizens are asking for roads. They are asking for bridges.
Yeah.
How is government going to balance those seemingly irreconcilable ends?
Well, I have to also say that the government has achieved a lot in terms of road infrastructure. I mean, I don't have the figures here, but never in the history of this country has a government done as many road projects as this government has done. And the Ministry of Roads has been given that data.
Never in the history of this country?
Never.
Including Kwame Nkrumah?
Oh, yes, including Kwame Nkrumah. I can give you, I'll give you that data. But that data is available because road minister has...
roads or roads?
Yeah.
Roads.
Oh, now you are.
Yeah, because that claim has been made by the Ministry of Roads before.
Yes,
which
I've
has
heard it
not
before.
Been born. They are changing the goalposts, right?
You've heard it before, so
yeah, but that doesn't
we
make it
don't
true.
need to even drill down to
never
whether
in the history of
new
this
roads.
country.
Of course, you can't say only new roads.
Come on.
There are new roads you do. There are roads you maintain. You know,
that even
sport
included
improvement.
you
know,
yeah.
So but you can interrogate the data.
But we have to use the same measure for the whole. You can't change you can't change the division of a new road on the basis of this government.
Bernard, you can interrogate the data, whether it's by sport improvement or by new roads. In all the classification of roads, we've done better.
I contest that. Until you give me data,
well,
I contest
of course,
that.
You can contest
I contest
it.
that.
You can contest it, but
yeah.
That is the truth. That's the fact, and I'll give you the data later. But as far as our budget is concerned,
yeah.
we have spent so much in roads, and we are determined to even spend more. The projects that have stalled, that they are referring to, are those that are funded by creditors, bilateral creditors, because of the debt standstill policy since December 2022. And so disbursements are not going on. Those are the projects that have stalled. And therefore, when we have reached an understanding with the creditors, we should get an indication when disbursement will resume. But as a government, we have been reviewing this problem. And one of the measures we want to put in place is to categorize those projects in terms of the outstanding completion works. So we're looking at so many options on how to address
I'm
that.
sure we'll talk as the budget approaches, but thank you so much for your time. Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam is the Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance, a very, very strategic position in government. And of course, he's also the MP for Karaga. He's been speaking to us on a number of issues. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.